we're not all that different. Like we had talked about the Nazi from World War II that they tried, and then the reporter said, that the alarming thing or the scary thing is this guy isn't that much different than the rest of us. It's just 1 degree off. And so you only know what you're being fed. And we're all being fed different things through different algorithms, with different media channel that we're watching, or mainstream media that we're watching, news that we're watching. Since the mid-2010s, national security analysts began noticing an odd term beginning to appear in documents originating from the Chinese People's Liberation Army. The PLA was increasingly referencing, quote, biological dominance as part of its long-term military strategy. Then in 2020, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, wrote an alarming op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, describing the threat that the Chinese government posed to the future of the United States. It contained this line.
U.S. intelligence shows that China has even conducted human testing on members of the People's Liberation Army in hope of developing soldiers with biologically enhanced capabilities. There are no ethical boundaries to Beijing's pursuit of power.
If you just go back and you look at the most recent Department of Defense annual report on China and their pursuit of military capabilities, there are substantial sections devoted to their pursuit of biological and cognitive dominance. And going as far back as 2016 of the China Brain Institute, which ostensibly was meant to identify ways to better assess brain and cognitive functions and how to improve cognitive functions.
That's naval officer and cognitive warfare expert, Jake Beber.
So if you want to think about the ability to directionally manipulate reaction times, analytic process, brain power, as it were. We famously say we only use 2 or 3% of our brain. Well, if I can, through brain interface or even brain control mechanisms, get into your brain and actually improve that by just 0.5% or 1%, I might be able to directionally manipulate you or directionally manipulate my own combat force to be bigger, stronger, faster, smarter. That's going to have a real effect, absolutely, on the battlefield.
At the Pentagon today, defense officials outlined new research into cognitive resilience training.
For years, the U.S. military and intelligence agencies have combined the hard power of conventional military strength with the soft power of psychological operations that can help shape political will and even spark social uprisings through communication. But up to now, China hasn't been able to match U.S. military might or global psychological influence. However, their strategy to take on the U.S. combines the two into a new kind of warfare that has the Department of Defense very, very concerned. Back in 2016, a handful of intelligence and defense officials in the U.S. and Canada started to get some strange reports from their diplomats stationed in foreign locations.
Intelligence analysts are reviewing a series of unexplained energy incidents reported by personnel overseas.
Oddly, though the reports were coming in from diplomats in far-off locations like Cuba, Vienna, Uzbekistan, and China, many were remarkably similar. Victims would hear a strange ringing sound, and afterwards would experience symptoms like chronic headaches, dizziness, problems thinking clearly, insomnia, feeling off balance, blindness, and other issues often associated with brain injuries. The victims sought treatment from specialists and neurologists who presented a variety of theories about what could be causing the issues. Then one of the victims was able to record the strange sound that many of them experienced, a recording that was later obtained by the Associated Press. Officials later called the phenomenon Havana Syndrome, after a number of diplomats in Cuba all experienced it there. Though there is still debate about the cause of the mysterious syndrome, many believe that it could have been caused by a direct energy weapon. In other words, this may have been a cognitive warfare attack.
While the jury is still out on what exactly it was and who was doing it and why and what were the reasons for the effects being felt, the fact is people suffered something. I think everybody will start there as fact.
Here's Jake Beber again.
One of the notes that people said was, I have had all this brain issue, either, created a physiological reaction, but there was sound associated with it. So let's think, can you conduct cognitive warfare using tonal manipulation? Yes, you can.
Though there are some questions about the source of the attacks, in 2020, investigators stumbled on a clue after a white Ford Mustang led police officers in the Florida Keys on a 100-mile-per-hour high-speed chase that ended only after they managed to stop the vehicle with spike strips.
All units respond.
After arresting the driver, police searched the vehicle and found a series of strange findings. A bowl with pieces of burned paper, documents linked to various bank accounts, a device that could erase the car's GPS, and a Russian passport.
No dope.
Right here, baby.
This is weird though.
Yes. It's all like, I think this captures like secrets from the government. I saw it on TV.
The man was later identified as Vitaly Kovalev, who worked as a chef at high-end restaurants in Washington, D.C. and New York. Investigators later discovered the truth about Kovalev's double life. He held a top-secret security clearance in Russia, where he studied at a military institute. He specialized in radio technology and microelectronics, and worked in the military as an electrical engineer. One of the FBI agents who was in charge of interrogating Kovalev while he was in custody was at home one night when she suddenly began to feel a sensation that she described as a drill going off in her ear that was so powerful it knocked her forward. She believed she was targeted by a direct energy weapon like the ones used in the Havana Syndrome attacks. Kovalev may have been working with other Russian spies on similar attacks. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Greg Edgreen, who led the Pentagon's investigation into attacks like this around the world, believes the Russian military is behind them and is using operatives to target high-profile American officials. And if they have these kinds of direct energy weapons, other adversaries likely do too. In 1999, a book written by two Chinese military colonels was released in the United States. The book attempts to answer a question that China was openly contending with. How can they defeat an adversary that is technologically and militarily superior in a war? A country like the United States. The book's title, Unrestricted Warfare, reflects its central idea that when an enemy cannot be defeated by conventional military forces, warfare shifts to spreading social division and undermining trust in key institutions, essentially destroying the enemy from within. Here's what they write.
If one party is at war with another, and the other party does not realize it is at war, the party who knows it is at war almost always has the advantage and usually wins. And this is the strategy set forth in unrestricted warfare, waging a war on an adversary with methods so covert at first and seemingly so benign that the party being attacked does not realize it's being attacked.
In 1960, The Twilight Zone aired an episode in which the power and phone lines went out on a tree-lined suburban block called Maple Street. The neighbors gather outside to try to figure out what's going on, when a boy, obsessed with comic books, suggests his theory.
What do you mean, Tommy? What are you talking about?
They don't want us to leave. That's why they shut everything off.
What makes you say that? Where'd you get that idea?
Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard? It's always that way in every story I've ever read about a ship landing from outer space.
Not long after, one of the neighbors decides to walk a few blocks over to find out if the blackout is affecting them as well.
Well, he was just going over to the next block to see if the power was on.
As afternoon turns into night, the neighbors become increasingly suspicious of each other.
I know who the monster is!
Then, a figure is seen walking onto the street from the darkness. One of the neighbors, who has become increasingly paranoid, pulls out a
shotgun. Would somebody think a thought around it? What good is a shotgun?
As the figure gets closer, the armed neighbor aims and pulls the trigger. As the group approaches, the figure that had been shot They realize that they've killed the neighbor who was returning from a few blocks over. Moments later, the lights in the house of the man who fired the gun start flickering.
It's Pete Van Horn.
Pete Van Horn. Well, he was just going over to the next block to see if the power was on.
Charlie, you killed him.
I didn't know who he was. I most certainly didn't know who he was. We trying to protect my home? And know it was somebody we knew?
Soon, lights on the whole block begin flickering as the neighbors descend into violence, throwing stones at one another.
No!
Look! Charlie. Charlie, the lights just went on in your house. Why did the lights go on in your house?
No, it's nothing of the sort. I didn't know the lights on, I swear I didn't. Somebody's pulling a gag or something.
Before eventually focusing their rage on the boy.
I know who the monster is. I know who it is that doesn't belong among us. I swear I know who it is.
All right, Charlie, let's hear it.
It's...
What are you waiting for?
Well, come on, Charlie, come on.
Who is it, Charlie? Tell us. It's a kid.
He was the one who knew. How did he know? How could he have known?
How did you know, Tommy? What's the matter with you people now? Stop!
In the closing scene, two men stand outside of a spaceship, looking down on the people of Maple Street, which is now in complete chaos.
Throw them into darkness for a few hours and then sit back and watch the pattern.
And this pattern is always the same?
With few variations. They pick the most dangerous enemy they can find, and it's themselves. All we need to do is sit back and watch.
Then I take it this place, this Maple Street, is not unique.
By no means. Their world is full of Maple Streets. And we'll go from one to the other and let them destroy themselves. One to the other. One to the other. One to the other.
The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices, to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy. And a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own, for the children and the children yet unborn. And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone.